Hello and welcome to Career Lunch Break. I am your host, Erin Lewber, and we are here yet again with another great podcast with another amazing female leader, Barbara Merola Pawar. Barbara and I know one another from Amazon, and we had the pleasure of working together for quite a few years. Barbara has since gone on to build what I would say is a beyond impressive career if you look her up on LinkedIn. And so I thought I love talking to strong, smart female leaders, and Barbara is exactly that. So, Barbara, let's start. You have a career in politics. You've worked at Amazon Business. You have worked with Bloomberg. You're now at IDC. Tell me a little bit about your career and just the arc that you've gone through throughout your professional journey.
Yeah, I love this question, Erin. And before we start, I just want to say how excited I am to be on this podcast. I have just watched how you've impacted so many careers, and with impacting careers, you've been impacting lives. And just being an Amazon alum, I love staying in touch with my network and watching your success from afar. So thank you for having me on this podcast. And I learned so much from the people you have on. So I'm very lucky to be part of this. I think when I think about my career, the main theme is taking risks and asking for what I want. When I was in politics for 9 years, it was a dream to work in politics, and I worked in the White House. I worked in political party and worked in state government, worked as a lobbyist, and all of those experiences were just a passion of mine. But I really wanted something that I could do even if I didn't live in DC. And I wanted a career that was a little bit more focused on metrics and outcomes and being able to set a goal and go after it. And sales is very much like that. And I really wanted to transition into sales. And so I put a plan in place for how I would do that. And that's how I found Bloomberg, because they were launching a new product for lobbyists and those selling to the government and influencing the government. So it was a natural
Mm,
transition for me to be able to do that. And I think there's several times in my career, I can think of 3 times right now, where I went after roles and it may have not been the right role. And they were hiring for someone more senior or more junior, but I still had the conversation. And that led to being considered for a role that wasn't even thought of in the organization. And they created a role for me. And so I've always thought in my career, have those conversations, take those risks. From Bloomberg, it led me to Gartner, and I wanted to sell more research, professional services. And then I wanted to build on that and be part of a startup again in a larger organization. When I was at Bloomberg, it was a startup in a larger organization. Then I found Amazon Business. And there we were part of a startup, a new B2B marketplace backed by Amazon. And in each step in my career, I took something from what I was doing in my current role and leveraged that for how it applies to my next role and leveraged those experiences to build on for my next opportunity. And I think that was another big lesson for me, because there's so many times where we just think about, oh, this current role doesn't relate to anything that I want to do. And I'm
mhm.
making such a huge pivot in my career. And how am I going to let people understand that what I'm doing now does relate? How am I going to connect the dots for those decision makers? And that's hard to do. And I learned that I had to really understand what is similar about my current role. What is it about my experience and what I'm doing that contributes to my next role? And what am I not doing in my current role that can give me some experience to be credible in going after the role that I really want? And so that was a big lesson for me, in addition to just having those conversations and going after roles, even if they're not the right fit, but
Yeah.
showing where I could be a good fit and having roles being created.
You know, I love that you brought this up because this is one of the things that I find myself talking about a lot because I work with so many pivoters. And when someone is pivoting or when they're thinking about even moving up in their career, because let's be honest, you're moving up into something most likely that, you've never led a team before or you've never led a team maybe with the scope that the next one has. But this idea of where you've built equity is the way that I always phrase it. And what you just said to me was I figured out where I had equity. Where did I have value? And where did I have experience that I could take and I could show that to the next role and say, this is something you're interested in, or this gives me that credibility. And one, it externally gives you that credibility, but then it also, a lot of us don't realize is it internally gives us credibility too. It helps affirm to ourselves, I'm standing on a strong foundation. I have things that I've built, skills and abilities and knowledge that is really meaningful. And then when you make that move, a smart pivoter uses that to their advantage. They know that that's what they can fall back on, that keeps them stable in the wobbly spaces.
Giving credibility to ourselves. And this is how I taught myself to do that. Writing down all of the impact statements that you've made in your career, that's helped me so much. Anytime that I've tried to pivot or take on a role that was much bigger than the role that I've had now,
Mhm.
or the role that I had currently, I would write down all of the stories. Like you use Carl, like,
Mhm.
what are the critical actions I've taken? What are the results? What are the learnings? What would I have done differently? And create a list of all of those stories. Anytime that you've made an impact or you've influenced a change or there's been a key learning or there's been something that you've implemented that had a key success. I have started making a list of all of these in my career. And yes, it's on your resume, but this is a chance to prep for interviews. You're going back to that list and identifying, okay, what are the key trends? And putting that into Claude and saying, hey, what are the key trends that we're seeing in these stories? What are the top 5 ways I'm making an impact in my career? And that helps us because you brought up a really important point. Sometimes the most important person that we need to convince is ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we have a list of all of our impacts and we're working with an LLM to load it in and provide some feedback to us on what we're doing really well, that's going to give us the confidence to
Yeah.
know what our brand is, the impacts that we've made. And that's how I've learned to do it. I've also gotten feedback from others, people that have managed me, coached me, people that I've managed and coached. It doesn't always lend itself to the most specific feedback or the most impactful feedback because a lot of
Mhm.
times the feedback is going to be nice and positive and general. And you really have to find those people that know you well and work very closely with you. And you have that psychological safety to ask for that feedback and they're willing to give that feedback. So a lot of times it could be a colleague that knows you really well. And add all of that feedback into that list. And that's how I've been able to develop my story and my brand when I'm going out for opportunities because I don't want to do the same thing in every role. I want to do something bigger and better, but I don't
Mhm.
always know how to articulate my impact. And so we have the benefit of LLMs now that can enable us to see things differently by sharing our perspective on what we think and what the data is telling us. And then we have an impartial third party, an LLM, giving us feedback on what they're seeing. And that can be really helpful as we're thinking about, hey, what do I want my next role to be? And how do I target my search a
Yeah.
little bit better? Because you always talk about being very specific and thoughtful in your search and not going after everything. And the hardest part in that is we don't always know what we're good at, and we
Mhm.
don't always know what we want. And so I find the writing it down and the getting that feedback from others and putting it into Claude gives us a little bit of clarity so we can be super specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, a lot of times when I sit down with someone as a client and as you walked through that exercise, like, it's so important. It's so important to do that work of taking. I'm going to date myself, but it's like when you have like a card catalog at the library, right? And you pull out and you have all these different examples and things. You need to catalog your experiences. And whether you do that at the end of each quarter or you do that maybe at some other regular interval, hopefully, because we all get a little busy and rusty if you wait too long and rely on your memory to try to remember, oh, what happened in the last 5 years? But really doing that
Yes,
cataloging or that inventorying of your own experiences, we forget things. And I think that's a great tip that I would want listeners to take away is you should have some way that works for you semi-regularly where you are capturing you, what you've done, your experiences, the achievements or the new things that you've learned, or maybe something difficult that you found your way through, because those are the things that do end up in a resume. They end up in interview questions, of course, but more importantly, that helping to build your personal brand. And I think when someone is starting out early in their career, I mean, we didn't have a personal brand or we didn't know what we were all about. We couldn't, give our elevator pitch maybe necessarily. But as you move, and especially as you move into leadership roles and you start to find yourself in conversations where maybe the next role you end up in isn't the one that's literally posted on the job website. It's something that someone went, oh, well, Barbara's really good at this thing. And I know Barbara for this. And I know someone who's looking for somebody who has this type of energy or personality trait and this type of leadership style. And until you're able to start to brand that for yourself, you're kind of missing out on being your own best advocate.
exactly. Because as you mentioned, when you're more senior, those roles are not posted and those roles are going to come from your network. And it's really interesting when people say, hey, I'm looking for VP of sales roles. Well, there's a lot of those roles available, and you're always coaching to be more specific on what you're looking for. And when you are more specific, that does save you a lot of time and it does enable you to get to the right role a little bit faster. And so, what type of company are you interested in? And what types of industries? What skills do you have now? And where have you made an impact that's already operating at a VP of sales level that you can share? Why is it VP of sales that you're looking for? What types of products or services are you trying to sell? How many FTE have you managed? And it doesn't have to have all of those answers, but there really should be some kind of elevator pitch on what you're passionate about and what you bring to the next role. And if you just have a couple of those things that you can share with others on what you're really passionate about, what you're excited for in your next role, and what you're planning to do in your next role and the impact that you're looking to make, then that enables people to introduce you to
Yeah.
others that are looking for people like you. And that's how I found my role at IDC was through my network, and I have always shared that I'm passionate about business transformation, sales transformation, creating high performing sales organizations, and just taking businesses to that next level and transforming businesses to drive that explosive growth. And that's something that someone can very quickly understand and identify with
Mhm.
me and remember if they are meeting anyone that's looking for someone of that background. And so I think it's so important, but it is hard to get specific when you're trying to pivot or you're looking for a new role because sometimes we think, oh, if we just look for anything, it's going to be easier. But I will say, especially when I'm interviewing for senior roles, when I look at resumes and the resumes are amazing and there's such great experience and you talk to the person and you ask them, "Hey, what kind of role are you looking for? What do you want to be doing day to day? What kind of impact do you want to make?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm really looking for anything." Or, "I'm looking for these 5 roles." It doesn't really denote that that person has a passion for something. It just makes it seem like that person's looking for a job.
Yeah.
And the more senior
Yeah.
you get, we really want people who have a specialty and expertise and a passion for what they're doing, not a generalist that just really wants to get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
And you probably see
Yeah.
that a lot at Amazon soon because there's probably people that are like, "Oh, it would just be so amazing to come work at Amazon. Like, I'm willing to
Yeah.
take like these 5 jobs."
I have seen that. I have where it's, we've ended up in the conversation. Well, I want to get my foot in the door here, but what I really want to go do is this. And I mean, I like the honesty there. I have to say, and I think all of us, there's nothing wrong with saying I see this as maybe an incremental step to where I want to be, but also there's something around having a clarity in what you want and being able to express that in a clear way to another person so they can kind of almost hold it in their hand and understand it versus think about if you went to a restaurant and you ask a waiter or a waitress and you say, what would you recommend? If they recommend one thing and they say, oh my gosh, you have to get the da 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 da, it's amazing, versus, well, you could get this or this or this or this or this. Your likelihood of latching onto that and saying, okay, we're going to try it. The decision fatigue is hard, first of all, in that. Second of all, the clarity is lost. You made it difficult for someone to pick. And so I think whether you're applying for a job or even if you're networking when you're talking, because I'm a big advocate of tell people. When you're looking, tell people because everyone's in their own lives and we're all, going about and being busy. But before we started recording, Barbara and I were talking about how Amazon is a wonderful network. We've met so many wonderful colleagues through our time working there and how folks have gone on to work in a variety of different places, but how helpful the Amazon alumni network is. And, telling people what you're looking for and having that clarity of here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm looking for next. This is the thing that's really going to light me up or really be interesting to me in my next role. Having those phrases that you can say to someone because you've done the work, you've sat down like Barbara talked about and sort of taken inventory of what you've done. You've asked people, and that's a wonderful tip, by the way, asking people who know you, because sometimes like it's amazing how the people all say the same things about us, and it's not often the stuff we'd say about ourselves. Do you find that?
Exactly. And sometimes it's a nice surprise.
Yeah.
And what I love about Amazon reviews is that we ask our superpower and we have to write what each other's superpower is. And I love that to get that clarity on what we think our superpower is versus what our colleagues and our leaders and those that we lead believe to be our superpower. And it's great to see those trends as well.
Yeah.
And I want to double click on something you said about asking and telling people that you're looking. I think that's so key because there are many times where I feel like people are looking. I know that they may be looking or they definitely are looking. And there's no shame in saying, hey, this is my role now. This is what I'm doing. But hey, this is actually what I'm looking for. And I actually got a role when I got my role at Bloomberg because when I was at a bachelorette party, we were talking about very typical on DC, like, where do you work? What do you do?
Yeah.
And I shared where I work, what I do. But in the next breath, I said, but actually, this is what I really want to do. And
Yeah.
this is what I'm excited about. I had no idea about Bloomberg launching a startup in DC. And one of my friends there, her friend was hiring and worked at Bloomberg and passed along my resume. And it was just that simple passing comment. And I think that that can be really powerful because if someone is in a position to help, they're going to say, oh, really? That's exciting. Tell me more about what you're looking for. And very rarely do people cut off the conversation. If they're able to help, they're going to want to help. And so being able to very quickly and in a succinct way share what you're passionate about and what you're looking for is really helpful, especially in different networking settings, telling people about your role, but what you're looking for. You never know where there's an opportunity for someone to help you and where the next role can come from. So,
Yeah.
talking about it and being open to it uh, while being fair to your current employer and respectful, I think can be really powerful.
An interesting thing to talk about, actually, like the being respectful to your current employer, but you can also be looking. And I had one of my mentors said, everybody's always looking, right? Like that's sort of the nature of things. We want to grow, we want to be challenged. And so I think there's this stigma around looking as if it has to be a bad thing. And where I've arrived is that sometimes you go and you look and you decide you're really happy where you're at. And sometimes it's that looking that reminds you of the things that you value. It almost forces you again to take inventory of, okay, what do I want? What is true? And I'm a big fan of doing like very zeros and ones. Like I like to be very fact based when I'm evaluating where I'm at in a role. And, does it meet, my needs for my family? And does it meet my needs for compensation and for like mental challenge and growth? And try to not let it get emotional because I think emotions can kind of take us down a different path sometimes if we're not careful. But I think it's really interesting to just take a different perspective on looking that yes, of course you're not going to not be doing your best or bringing your 100% to your current job, but the idea that it's okay to be looking because you're paying attention, you're out in the world, and if you find something that really lights you up about what's next, like you should go after that. And if it reminds you that you're perfectly happy where you're at, then wonderful, celebrate that. But there's kind of this stigma that can pop up around looking that it must mean something's really bad. And sometimes that's true, but a lot of times it can come from a really healthy place. Go ahead. You look like you're going to tell me something.
That is so true. It's so true because I have been there. There was a role about 3 years ago where I got an offer from another company and I didn't accept it. And I stayed at the company that I was at. And then a couple months later, I got a new role, a much larger role at the company that I was working in, and I stayed there. So it worked out. But it's so true because if you look at it, not from the sense of, oh, I'm going to be interviewing, it's, I'm going to learn about the market. I'm going to learn about the industry. If you're talking to different types of companies, you can leverage that to understand how to do your role better at your current job. And you're going to be more well versed in the market and the industry. And a lot of these types of conversations are going to be happening at networking events that are in the morning or the evening, because the more senior you are, it's just harder to do that during the workday. But it's not necessarily something that's going to take away from your current role because you are learning so much about the industry. And if you decide not to take a role because it doesn't fit your long-term goals, then truly believe that something better will come along. And I know that that can be very challenging, especially if there are obligations or don't have a current role. But if there is opportunity to take a step back and say, hey, what I'm doing now is actually more exciting than what this role may be. And yes, this offer may be different, or one aspect of it may be a little bit better, like comp or certain scope or remote versus in person, whatever that is. Looking holistically about not just the role, but your career and how that fits into your long term goals, personally and professionally, can help give you clarity, and that experience can help reaffirm that what I'm doing now is actually better. I'm in a better situation if I stay at my current role. let me be grateful for that and
Mhm.
see how I can get myself to that next level and get promoted. And so there's also opportunity to leverage that experience to say, oh, hey, maybe there's some ideas that I have for improving my role or expanding my scope. And I always think when we say at Amazon, learn and be curious. I think any opportunity you have to learn and be curious about the market is always a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I don't think there are any points for sort of burying your head and putting it under the umbrella of, "Oh, I'm being a good person because I'm not looking at anything else opportunity-wise." And really, it creates a more balanced experience. I think when you're too buried and you're too in what you're in and you're not paying attention and having those conversations and things like that, it's a miss, right? Because whether you're learning to be better at the current job and or maybe having a refreshed perspective, it's almost like when you go on vacation and then you come back and you're like, oh, I feel so refreshed and ready to take this on. Sometimes those outside conversations can do those same things for you. And so I think it's really important to have those experiences that introduce and challenge you to have a refresh on your perspective. I want to ask you this, Barbara, because you've said the word many times, and I would love for a little more discussion from you around networking because you mentioned it's a little harder to do as you move up, and how do you stay well networked? I think you've talked about that it's been important in your career, and so how do you do that, and how do you think you've been so successful?
I think there's small things that we all can do to stay top of mind with our network, and you've done it really well with LinkedIn. I think there's not enough emphasis placed on commenting on people's posts, resharing posts, and engaging with people already in our network, former colleagues, people that we interviewed with. If you had an interview with someone but didn't get the job, that person's still in your network. And I've had people that I've interviewed with, but I didn't get the role, help me find other roles. And people that are your friends and friends of friends, all of those people are in your network. And so spending time every day sending LinkedIn requests, hey, really great to meet you on whatever meeting. And then taking the time to engage, I think can be very impactful. I also try to join organizations that have others in the same role as me. Women in Revenue, Women in Sales Leadership Circle. There are several other organizations that you can join. I was in Chief for a number of years. That expands your network and enables you to build alliances
Mhm.
with those that are outside your company. And I also think it's important to ensure that you're reaching out to people when they have something new going on in their lives. If they are in a new role and they're hiring and they post about that, that's an opportunity to look in your own network to see who you can help. Another thing that I've learned a lot about networking is helping people as much as possible. And you talk about this to your network as well. As often as you can help others, that is going to come back to you. And I found the more time that I can dedicate time to do coffee chats and introduce someone to someone else in my network, that can be
Yeah.
very impactful because we can't expect if we need to look for a new role or if we want to look for a new role or we're starting our own company, we can't expect people to jump at the chance to help us if we haven't helped them or we haven't made an impact. And I think the more time we spend helping others, that's just going to come back to us. And I've just seen the power of networking and how much people want to help each other because we've all been in that position where we're looking for a role or we're hiring for a key role and can't find the right candidate,
Mhm.
or we're looking for clients for our new business. Whatever it may be, we've all been in that position. And so the most that we can do and what we should always be doing is continuing to find ways to help each other in our network
Yeah.
and being really visible. doing in-person events as much as you can, virtual events. There are so many organizations that we can be part of in our career, and we should know what those organizations are, but be active and identify ways where you can get to know others by not just joining meetings, but contributing a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. And you were talking about introductions, and this has become one of my new favorite ways to network because it's just thinking of the people who you like and know and being like, this person should know this person. And it's so fun to introduce two people whose paths might not have crossed otherwise. And just your involvement can purely be person meet person. No need to keep me copied. I just think you two should know one another. Here's why, and the spark has been lit. And I love that type of networking because it creates energy, it creates new unexpected connections between people. And then your network becomes that much more robust, I guess, because different people who you are connected with now have different connections with one another as well. And it really does create a richness. One of the things that I've started doing, because I've not always thought of myself as a good networker, in the clinical sense, right? Where it's like you go to the event and you show up and you eat the cheese and you hold the wine and you chit chat about the weather 76 times. I don't particularly like it. And I don't find myself wanting to do that very often. But my new thing, my new little trick is when somebody pops into my head and I think I haven't, yeah, that person, whatever reason, whether it's I see something come up on my LinkedIn feed, whether it's that I'm talking here with you and suddenly you're talking about networking and I'm thinking, oh, I have to say hi to this person. I jot those things down and then usually LinkedIn is the easiest way, or maybe a text message. And it's just, hey, how are you doing? I don't know what it is. I'm not a particularly woo woo person, but I feel like sometimes you do get those nudges from your brain that knows better, that reminds you of someone who you haven't talked with in a while. And just to create that outreach because that person isn't in your organic day to day. And sometimes those connections are the ones that are really fulfilling in a lot of ways, not just in getting a job or, something business minded, but just, people who might be in the same life phase as you or somebody who might understand something that you're trying to sort through right now. And so I guess maybe as I've gotten a little older and wiser in life and in business, I found that for me, when I get those little whispers in my head of, oh, hey, this person, or I saw your name when you commented on someone else's on another post. And I was like, oh my gosh, Barbara, I haven't talked to her in forever. And I was like, come be on the podcast. Like those are the little nudges sometimes for me in networking. Like that's my version of networking. And I think sometimes networking gets like such a robotic feel and it doesn't have to be.
Exactly. Because, I commented on a post and then you saw it and then you're like, oh, let me catch
Yeah.
up with Barbara. And so that I think could be really powerful because also, if we think about it, we're all spread across the world now. We're not in the office. Our networks are remote and global. And so doing an outreach on LinkedIn or sending someone a text, it feels very personal. It doesn't take a lot of time and it's very organic and genuine. And I think can absolutely help a relationship and reconnect with people that you haven't talked to in a while.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pivot us a little bit because one of the things that before we hop on a podcast, I always ask my guests some things, like what do we want to talk about? And what are some themes and things like that? And one of the things that Barbara told me is that she wanted to talk about being both a results leader and a great people leader. And I think that that's something probably that I hope all leaders would aspire to, right? Is to really be good at driving the results for the business and being a deeply good human being and good leader of others while doing so. And I'm curious, as you've gone through your career, has it always been easy to do both of those things? And have you ever run into a time where maybe they've been at odds with one another, where you've had to pick or sort of manage the two as separate at odds things?
Yes, because sometimes there can absolutely be a struggle. And there was a time where I had a very low performing team and I needed to provide the enablement, the support, and ensure everyone was in the right roles, and morale was really low. And I had to deliver the results that we needed for the business. And I also had to ensure that we were doing all of the support that we needed for the team in a very kind and respectful way. And also ensuring that the top performers feel a little bit more validated that, we are ensuring that we're not going to have them just carry the business.
Mm,
And so it can be very challenging to balance being a results leader with being a people leader. But how I like to think about it is if you are being a results leader, you really need the buy in of the people to be able to deliver the results. And the first thing that you have to do is make sure that you have the right people around you and the right team. And if you have the right team around you, bringing them along, especially your leaders, in saying, hey, this is the vision for our business. This is how we're going to deliver results. That means that there may be those that are not in the right role, or there may be some changes that we need to make in our business. There may be some investments that we're not going to be able to make anymore. And get the leaders to understand that, provide feedback, and kind of be your partner in that journey.
mhm,
And then they can shape that message with their team. That helps a lot. Also, I love this concept of a first team mentality, and it's something I use with my leadership teams, is that our first team is not, if we're a leader, it's not the people that we're managing. Our first team are all of our colleagues that report into the same manager. And our main priority is our boss's metrics and business outcomes that she or he are trying to deliver. And how am I and my collective colleagues in the same role or at the same level reporting to that manager going to work together to deliver on that? And that helps a lot as a leader because you're not thinking about, oh, how am I going to just consistently advocate for my people and not deliver for the business? You have to think about, okay, how am I going to first deliver for the business and communicate this in a way to my team that they are bought in, they're motivated, they're excited, and we're prioritizing the decision that's best for the client and the business, but with making sure that it's in a way that people are bought in and excited. Because if you don't have people that are bought in and excited, they're not going to help you deliver those results. So that's kind of how I think about balancing the two. And it takes a lot of practice. And when I have a leader that kind of falls out of that, it's easy coaching to go back and say, hey, remember first team mentality. This is why we're going to make that decision. And this is why it's best for the business. Let's talk about how we can message it to the team so that they're bought in and excited about it. And then it just organically, when other things come up, it's easier to do that without having to coach to it.
yeah, yeah. I love that, and I I think that that's a really helpful tool for someone who's maybe getting into leadership or they're in leadership. Like, even as you're saying this to me, I was thinking about it of, have I done something like this in my leadership? And it's interesting because Amazon Business recently, we refreshed our vision statement, and I think a lot of people, you hear vision statements like, oh, grown, right? Mission, vision. But what I think is common between what you're telling me and when I'm thinking about that vision statement is it gives you kind of that North Star, that thing that is unifying why we're doing what we're doing, where we're going, where we're headed. And it allows you to recalibrate so that when something gets off track, there's like the thing in front of you on the horizon that we all can see and we go, oh, yep, we all have to shift over here because the thing at the horizon. And we've agreed that that's the thing that we're going toward. And I do think that that's such a powerful way to get your team on board and to stay aligned because we all know, especially right now, I mean, there's so much happening in the world, in our lives, in technology that things change faster than we can plan all the time. We go through this planning cycle every year, well, at Amazon. And it's been an interesting conversation because life is moving faster than annual planning nowadays. And so how do you plan for a whole year when we're at the forefront of things like AI where we don't know what the next 2 months are going to look like? And so when you have that North Star, that team first, you have a bit whatever I guess it is that works for your team, it's like it helps you make those choices in the moment that stay aligned to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Because if we think about, like, let's just take agentic AI. So many organizations were planning for generative AI and investing in LLMs and prompt engineering, and that's not innovative anymore. Right now, we're building agentic solutions. And where are these autonomous agents and hierarchies of agents and super agents that are making decisions? And we have AI as a co pilot and working with humans to enable a business function, to enable productivity, to drive revenue, but we're building agents that can be autonomous and make decisions on our behalf, and we're checking and we are enabling these agents as part of our business. And we weren't thinking about that 2 years ago. And so it is really interesting how fast things are moving. And I love planning. And just as long as we can be nimble and adapt and innovate, I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't know that we've ever been in a time where there's so much that we all can kind of agree we just don't know, right? We're really, I hate the expression building the plane as we fly. It might be number one on my list of expressions that I hate. However, this is an appropriate moment to say we are building the plane as we fly. And it really
That
is,
is
it's
so true.
interesting. And, it sounds like for you as a leader, you found a way to stay focused on those results. Like, what is the impact you need to deliver? And then again, sort of that mentality for your team that even if things change or you need to adapt along the way, you know what you're headed toward. And you have this common unifier across your team that helps everybody know what they're working toward. And it keeps things meaningful and it keeps things focused. So tell me this. Okay, we're coming
Yeah,
up at the end,
that's so
toward
true. I love
the
it.
end of our time here. I have maybe, I don't know. I want to ask you two questions. Do you have time for two questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So the first one, what's one of the hardest leadership lessons that you've learned in your career?
I love that question. I think the hardest leadership lesson that I had to learn in my career is that it's not always about the results that we've driven and the impact that we've driven and our ability to do the job. Sometimes it's really about your network and who you know. And a lot of times you will get hired or promoted based on who you know and who has seen your work in the past and can vouch for you versus people who may not be the decision makers that know your work really well and can vouch for you. That's why it's so important to network internally, externally, and ensure that if you have sponsors within your organization, we've seen the market the last few years. People are
Yeah.
consistently moving. The only constant we've had is change. And so working with one or two sponsors that you know they're going to promote you, that's great. But they may get an amazing new job and leave your company tomorrow. Who else knows your impact? And I've just had to learn the hard way that sometimes roles are just based on your network. And we're not always going to get the roles that we want, even though we may be the best person for the role. There could be someone that you don't know of that's even better for that role. And then there's a better role for me. And so that was a big lesson I had to learn. And there were a couple roles where I was like, I know that I can do that job and I know I should have gotten it. But It's based on, even if you have a consensus and you're interviewing with a bunch of people, it's really based on the decision maker, the network, and a lot of times a
Yeah.
decision maker will decide based on that and not necessarily the impact that someone else has made in the role.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard one, isn't it? When you know that it could/should be you, but something doesn't work out that way. Yeah, that's tough. How I lied. I have 2 more questions. Now I still have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
How do you pick yourself up from that when something, I think we all have that in our careers where we sort of sell ourselves on the idea of something before it's realized, and if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't happen, how do you pick yourself up and refresh?
Yeah. And this most previous time that it happened, I realized, okay, I want to understand what I need to do better to be able to get that role. And my lesson was that I'm not always networking with the right people. There's a lot of people that know my impact and what I can do, but I maybe need to build my network beyond the people that I think are impactful, but maybe not they're not as impactful as I thought. And it's also, secondly, a time to reassess. I had to think about, okay, was this role the right role for me to begin with? Or did I just want that role because I'm competitive and because I think I deserve it? But let's really think about, is that what I want to do long term? And then I realized, okay, no, maybe that's not the right role for me. Would I have been good at it? Yes. But let's take that and figure out what I am really passionate about and what I'd be good at and what I want to do day to day and define what that is. And that's where the exercise came in of writing all my
Yeah.
impact down and figuring
Yeah.
out my brand and what I'm good at and my superpowers. And then the third step was, okay, let's go find that role.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a little bit of a boost for yourself, a little hype session to go back into all of that and reaffirm who you are, what you're good at, what you believe, what you're all about, and then get back out there. I find myself in speaking with a lot of people who come to me at a time where something hasn't gone their way or they've been through a series of disappointments, and it oftentimes, like, that's a big piece of the puzzle, is just going back and reminding yourself of all the things that are good, that are great, that work, that you're talented at, that you like, that there's many fish in the sea, so to speak. There's options out there, and just doing that reset, I think that's really important. All right. I've kept you a long time. Final question. I always ask each guest to share a piece of advice, whether it's advice you've been given, whether it's something that you've sort of built on your own over years of experience, but a good piece of advice that you'd leave with our listeners today.
When providing feedback, think of a way to share that feedback that provides a potential solution and it shows positive intent. And what I mean by that is there are times where you're going to have to share negative feedback about product, a process, whatever it is. And we always want to make sure that our feedback doesn't come across as complaining or negative. And so sharing something that you see as a potential solution for the problem and framing it in a way that makes it a positive. And so, if there is feedback around communication around a product launch, for example, sharing a potential solution on how it can be better and then sharing that it's really exciting to have this product launch. We're all excited about these communications and hey, this potential solution can make it even more impactful. And hey, by the way, this is a really exciting aspect of it. This is a way that we can tweak it to make it slightly better. And it's not so much like what you say, it's how you say it. And a lot of people make you think that it sounds very corporate. And is very polished. But I think when we are interacting with people we don't know well, when we're trying to build influence, when we're getting to know people in a new role, I think really sharing how you really think is important and sharing it in a way that has positive intent and kind of encourages collaboration and enables someone to be excited to want to help you, I think can be very impactful as you're building those relationships. And so, how you give feedback, I think is really important.
Yeah. Well, that to me sounds like some wisdom that you have built through some very wonderful professional experiences over the years, and it's earned wisdom, right? I'm sure it's probably
Yeah.
been really
And I've learned it the
interesting.
hard way.
Yeah. I mean, don't we find that all of our best lessons were the ones we learned the hard way?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, thank you so much. When we started, I told Barbara, oh, this will be like 30 minutes and then we'll be done. And we have well passed our 30-minute mark because I think this was just such a wonderful conversation. I think you carry yourself with such poise, and I really do admire the growth trajectory that you've had in your career. You know, I got to be your colleague for a period of time, and I can still remember going to New York and we were all out at a dinner and sitting at a table together. It was a dimly lit restaurant. I couldn't tell you what the restaurant was, but I can remember vividly being there together, and it was such a fun time to, be colleagues and to, have lost touch here and there. But then we have, again, that alumni network that we cross paths by way of someone else or by a comment on a LinkedIn post. Is such a pleasure to follow your career. And I'm excited for whatever is next for you. And I thank you so much for joining me and sharing a little bit of wisdom that you've built in your career today.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm so grateful to be here and be part of your impact that you've had on your network. And thank you for all you do to impact lives. It's truly amazing and life changing. And it's just great to see this journey and to be part of it in one small way. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Well, with that, we're going to call it a wrap, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of Career Lunch Break.